Okay, so welcome to the fifth tutorial and the last one. So today we are going to talk about the models that Frank introduced this morning about copolymer in the vicinity of an interface between two immiscible solvents. Okay, so this morning Frank introduced the model and he explained that the free energy was convergent, and he said that okay, we can divide the phase diagram into two different phases. So one is localized, the other one is delocalized. And you can decide whether you are localized or not by comparing the free energy with the quantity lambda h. Okay, so I will recall this right now. So the configuration of the polymer are given by the trajectory of a simple random walk. Okay. So in dimension 1 plus 1, so it's a simple random walk. Okay, and the disorder is this time given by the type of the monomers. Okay, so it's a copolymer, so the monomers can be of two types, either hydrophilic or hydrophobic, and they appear randomly along the chain. So this is, in a sense, encoded by the IID sequence omega I, okay, which is IID. So these are Bernoulli trials. Okay, Bernoulli trial of parameter 1/2 such that P that omega 1 is equal to +1 or -1 is equal to 1/2. Okay, and then the is monomer is of type is so hydrophobic if omega I is equal to 1, and is hydrophilic if omega I is equal to -1. So the sequence omega encodes for the disorder, okay, and for the type of each monomer. And then you have the medium, which is okay, a flat interface separating oil and water. Okay. Okay, so this morning Frank introduced the free energy, okay, which is, so first of all, so in size n, so for a polymer of size n, so made of n monomers, the set of trajectories is given by omega n, okay, which are the SI, so the n-step trajectories of the simple random walk, defined above. And beta is 1 over the temperature. And then for each trajectory in omega n, we associate an Hamiltonian, okay, an energy which is Hn omega beta Hs, and given by beta times sum over I equal 1 to n of omega I plus h delta I. Okay, and remember that delta I is the sign of Si minus 1 Si. Okay, so it tells you if whether the edge number I lies in the oil or in the water. Okay, so that's the energy associated with each trajectory. Okay, so now with these quantities we can define the free energy. Okay, and Frank said this morning that this was converging. So Fn omega beta h, okay, which is 1 over n logarithm of expectation over the trajectory of exponential Hn omega beta h of S. Okay, and this as n goes to infinity, converges towards the free energy, which is F beta h. Okay, and remember that this does not it's self-averaging, so almost surely in the disorder omega, this is going to a constant. Okay, so F beta h. And then, okay, with this free energy, you can decide whether you're localized or not. So the localized phase corresponds to the beta h such that F beta h strictly larger than beta h. Okay, so this contribution of the free energy was given by the trajectories that never cross the interface and remains above in the oil all the time, so above the interface. And you're delocalized when beta h, okay, then is such that the free energy is equal to beta h, okay? So that the free energy is really given, in this case, by the trajectories that stay in the oil. Okay, so we have these two phases. So right now we're going to make a slight change, as you can see, in the Hamiltonian, but that's just for convenience, and it doesn't change anything. But instead of this formula here, we're going to redefine the Hamiltonian as, okay, so beta times the sum over I equal 1 to n, okay, of omega I plus h, delta I minus 1. Okay, so this amounts to just shifting the free energy by minus beta h. Why? Because this minus 1 here actually gives a contribution of the form minus beta hn, okay? So minus beta hn minus beta h sum over I equal 1 to n of the omega I, okay? And by the law of large number, this is a small o of n, okay? So when you divide it by n, this goes to 0, so it does not contribute to the free energy. And actually, this term contributes by minus beta h, okay? So if you use this Hamiltonian, and actually that's what we are going to do now, okay, using this Hamiltonian, you just change a little bit so let's call it h twiddle, this one, and you just change a little bit the free energy by just shifting it of minus beta h. So this time, we're going to call gn omega beta h, which is going to be 1 over n logarithm of the expectation of this new Hamiltonian h n omega beta h twiddle, sorry, omega beta h s. Okay. And this goes towards j of beta h, which is simply f of beta h minus beta h. Okay. So in the following, I won't mention the twiddle anymore, okay? But keep in mind that we are now working with this Hamiltonian. And then the localization, delocalization can be characterized with J just by J beta H strictly positive, okay, for the localized phase, and the delocalized is going to be J of beta H equal to 0. Okay, so remember this morning, Frank, he drew the phase diagram, and it was like this. So here you have the critical curve between, so here is beta, here is H, okay, and this is H C of beta, the critical curve, so that below the critical curve you're localized, and above you're delocalized. Okay. And today we would like to find a lower bound on the critical curve. Okay, so to find a lower bound, we must first find a lower bound on the free energy, J beta H. Okay, so find the function f, m, let's say, find the function M, okay, of beta h, such that for all beta h, G of beta h is larger or equal to M of beta h. Okay, and then, so we are looking for a function of this type, and we want to know an analytic form of the function, okay? Because then we want to study this function and know whether it's positive or not. Because when this function will be strictly positive, okay? So when M beta h strictly positive, then you are sure that G beta h is also strictly positive, and then this implies that h is strictly below the critical curve, the real critical curve. Okay, so now we are looking for a lower bound, okay, on the free energy. So the easiest way to find a lower bound on the free energy is to restrict, okay, the set of trajectories on which we are computing the free energy. Okay, so instead of considering all the trajectories, we are going to consider a subset of omega n, and we will try to take a subset like in a smart way, so that we can on all the trajectories of this subset, we can easily compute the Hamiltonian. Okay, and also to have a sharp lower bound, we would like that these trajectories that we are picking, okay, we want to pick trajectories that have a large Hamiltonian, okay, so that they fit as well as possible with the polymer measure. Okay, so how to do that? To find these trajectories. So how to define this set of trajectories? So actually, we're going to look at some long stretch, okay, along the chain. So let's say that this is 0 and this is n. And we are going to look for long stretches, okay, of monomers that have, okay, an atypical average. Okay, so basically, we are going to look for long stretches. Okay, let's say that this is I. Okay, and we look for long stretches that satisfy some of the omega I for I in large A, smaller than minus delta times size of I. Okay, so and delta is just between 0 and 1 and strictly positive. Okay, so why do we do that? Because when we have found such a stretch, okay, then it becomes interesting for the polymer, okay, to pass in the water during I. Okay, so why is that so? Because as you can see in the formula, the contribution of I is going to be minus 2 beta sum over I in large A of omega I plus H. Okay, this is when you are in the water. Okay, when you are below the interface, this term is equal to minus 2. Okay, so you get minus 2 times beta times this sum. Okay, and then to maximize it, you want the sum of the omega to be small. Okay, so basically to be of order minus delta size the length of the stretch. Okay, so this is a large deviation event, so it won't happen very often, but when it happens, it can be interesting to pass below the interface. Okay, and the advantage of that kind of trajectories is that we can easily compute the Hamiltonian. Okay, because we are just looking at sequences, consecutive sequences of omega I. Okay, so now let's write this properly. Okay, so we look at 0n, and we will pick L, okay, a large integer. Okay, and we subdivide 0n into subintervals of length L. Okay, so this is going to be I1, then I2, and they are all of length L. until the last one, which will be I n over L minus 1. Okay? And then I should say that ij, okay, is the, okay, that's the integers between j, L plus 1, okay, and j plus 1, L. Okay. So we subdivide 0n into this, we make a partition into these smaller intervals of length L. Okay. Yes, so finally 0n can be partitioned into okay, the union over I equal 1, 0 to n over L minus 1 of, let's call it j of ij. Okay. Okay, and now for each of these intervals, we are going to define the sum of the omega I in this interval. So it's going to be omega j, okay, which is the sum over I in ij of omega I. Okay, so this is just the sum of the omega I over each subintervals. Okay, so then once we have done it, we will look for, as we said before, we will look for the stretches that are satisfying these conditions. Okay, so that the average is really negative. So and then so we're going to call I0. It's going to be minus 1. Okay, and for all j larger than 1, we will define ij as the infimum of the I larger than ij, let's call it ij plus 1, over ij plus 2, okay, such that omega I is smaller than minus delta L. Okay, so and then we have a sequence of integers, and on each of these integers, okay, you know that the associated subinterval satisfies this condition, okay, that omega I is smaller than minus delta L. And then we define T n omega, okay, which is just the number of these intervals between 0 and L. So which is the maximum, okay, over j larger than 1, 0, j larger than 0, such that ij times L is smaller than n. Okay, so this is just the number of such intervals, okay, between 0 and n. So finally, the picture is going to look like that. So you have I1, I2, and then finally you find here I1, okay, and so on until the last one, which is going to be ITN omega. Okay. Okay. So now we are going to define our subset of trajectories in the following way. We will ask the trajectories to stay in the oil whenever I is not in one of these Ij, okay? And as soon as we enter in one of these intervals, we will ask the polymer to go in the water. Okay, so at the end, the trajectory will look like that. So first a long excursion in the water, and then a small excursion in the oil. Okay, because this is a good this is one of the good intervals, and then again a long excursion in the water until you find the second good interval. Okay, it will be, let's say, here, and then you go back, you pass in the water, I2, okay, and so on until the last one, which will be I of I Tn omega. Okay. And finally, you arrive in L. Okay. And this, we're going to call these trajectories omega n L of omega, okay? Because, of course, this depends on omega, okay? So finally, it's going to be defined as S, S in omega n, such that Si strictly negative for all I belonging to union over J equal 1 to Tn omega of Ij, okay, intersected with the trajectories in omega n, such that Si strictly positive as soon as you are not in one of these intervals, okay? Union over J equal 1 to Tn omega of Ij. Okay, this is a bit wrong because I don't take into account the fact that the trajectories has to be equal to 0, okay, at the extremities of these intervals, but okay, just keep in mind that this is the case. Right, so now we will compute the free energy restricted to these trajectories. Okay, so for this I need to clean up a bit. So the first thing we can say is that each trajectory, actually I shouldn't have called the trajectories like this because it looks like, let's call them V, okay? V, N, L, omega. So the first thing we notice is that for each of these trajectories, the Hamiltonian is the same, okay? So for every trajectory S, for all S in V, N, L, omega, okay, the Hamiltonian Hn omega beta H of S, okay, is equal to what? Actually, as long as you are in the oil, the Hamiltonian the Hamiltonian doesn't change, okay, because this is equal to 0 when delta I is equal to 1. And as soon as you pass in the water, then you sum up the contribution on these intervals. So finally, for each of these trajectories, you're going to be equal to beta sum over J equal 1 to Tn omega, okay, of, finally, of omega J, okay, omega J plus HL, and that's it. Okay, so omega J, remember that omega J, I will rewrite it here, omega J is, and this is not omega J, this is omega Ij, sorry, Ij, where omega Ij is the sum, okay, over I in Ij of the omega I. Okay, so this is the Hamiltonian for each of these trajectories. So now let's compute the free energy reduced to this trajectory. So, expectation of exponential of h n omega beta h is going to be larger than the same quantity, so the partition function restricted to the trajectories in VNL, so S in VNL omega, okay? And now, we know that they all have the same Hamiltonian, so it's going to be, and actually the Hamiltonian, I should have had a -2 in front here, okay? Because delta I minus 1 is equal to -2 as soon as you are in the water, okay, as you are below the interface. So minus 2 here. Okay, so finally, the Hamiltonian becomes product, okay, over j equal 1 to Tn omega of expectation of exponential minus 2 beta omega j plus HL. Okay, so this is for the Hamiltonian, and then we have to compute the entropy associated with these trajectories. Okay, so actually, so the conditions are restricted to, okay, 1 of Si strictly negative on I belonging to I Aj. Okay, so on these good intervals, Si will remain negative, and in between, Si strictly positive for all I in, so for all I in Ij plus 1, Ij plus 1 L, okay, until I j plus 1 times L. That's it. Okay, and finally, you have also to take into account this last stretch here, okay, that is just staying above the interface, so 1 of Si strictly positive for all I in I Tn omega plus 1, Tn omega plus 1, L until n. But we are going to get rid of it easily. Okay. So let's continue the computation. So finally, we are left with something that is much simpler than it looks like. Okay, then, so let's call it the partition function, the omega beta h. Okay, so finally, the partition function, the n omega beta h, is larger than. Okay, the product. So let's take the logarithm immediately. Okay, so the logarithm is gonna give. So this product, okay, doesn't depend on the random wall, so we can take it out of the expectation. So finally, it gives you sum over j equal 1 to Tn omega of minus 2 beta omega ij plus HL. Okay, so this is for the Hamiltonian, and then plus Tn omega, because now you have to take into account the fact that you make one excursion below the interface on each of the good intervals here. So yeah, another notation, let's call K of n, okay, the probability that Si strictly positive for all I in 0, in 1, n minus 1, and Sn equal to 0. Okay, so that's just the probability to make an excursion in one of the half upper plane, in one of the half plane, and that this excursion is exactly of length n. Okay, so this will give you k of L, okay, because you make, each time you make one excursion of length L, so the entropy associated is k of L. And this will give you an entropy of k tau j of L, where tau j is going to be the length of this interval, which is I j plus 1, okay, minus so I j plus 1 minus, so k tau j L, minus I j minus 1, okay, minus I j minus 1. This is tau j. And it gives you k of tau j L. So finally, what you get here is Tn omega logarithm of kl, okay, coming from here, plus sum over j equal 1 to Tn omega of logarithm k tau j L. And plus this last part, okay, the last excursion, which is going to be smaller, in any case, smaller than logarithm of k of n, okay? Since we are working with a lower bound, we can bound from below the probability to stay above the interface between Tn omega L and n by k of n. Okay, it doesn't cost anything. Okay, so we are left with this. And now we divide by n. Okay, so we take 1 over n logarithm of the n omega beta h. Okay, and this is larger than. So this time, every omega j, you can replace them by delta L, because actually they are smaller than minus delta L. Okay, and minus minus is going to be a plus. Okay, so finally you end up with Tn omega divided by n times 2 beta delta L minus HL. Okay, so Tn omega times minus 2 beta minus times minus delta L, which makes 2 beta delta, and this is L here, L, and here plus HL, which gives a minus HL. Okay, so that's for this part. Then we have again here Tn omega divided by n logarithm of KL. And here we have 1 over Tn omega logarithm of k tau j L. Okay, that's it. And plus log of kn divided by n. Okay. So now we are going to use the fact that k of n, we can find a strictly positive constant such that k of n is always larger than a constant divided by n at the power 3/2. Okay? So this is just because we are dealing with a simple random walk. Okay, then this term here can be bounded above by c divided by tau jl at the power 3/2. So let's keep going. It's going to be Tn omega divided by n. Then this we can simplify a bit by writing 2 beta L delta minus h plus log of KL. Okay, and then yeah, one sum is lacking here, so here it's 1 over Tn omega, 1 over Tn omega sum over j equal 1 to Tn omega, like that. Okay, and this, okay, you replace by c divided by tau jl at the power 3/2, and it gives you finally log c. Okay, log c minus 1 over Tn log C, that's it, log C minus 3/2 of log L, minus 3/2 of logarithm of L, okay? This is because you want to get rid of the L here. And minus 1 of Tn omega, okay, sum of j equal 1 to Tn omega of logarithm of 1 divided by tau jl at the power 3/2. And actually, since I have a minus here because I actually already took minus the logarithm, so here you get at the end tau j, and here you get minus 3/2. Minus 3/2 of this. Okay, and always plus logarithm of kn divided by n. Okay. Out of the sum here. Okay, so finally here you use the Jensen inequality to replace this. Okay. This is actually smaller or equal, but then with the minus it becomes larger or equal by Jensen, larger or equal to minus 3/2, 1 logarithm of sum over j equal 1 to Tn omega of tau j divided by Tn omega. Okay, we just apply Jensen to take the log out of the sum. Yes, then we have this. And we have Tn omega divided by n to beta L delta minus h plus, so all this with this as well is a small o of L, okay, plus small o of L and minus 3/2. So actually the sum of the tau j from j equal 1 to n, okay, is larger than everything, which is n, minus the sum of the size of the good intervals, okay, which are Tn omega L. Okay, this is larger than this. That's just the tau j are the sum. The tau j are the length of the interval between two good intervals. So that's what you get at the end. Okay, and you put it inside here. Okay, and so you obtain finally minus 3/2 logarithm. That's it, logarithm of n divided by Tn omega minus L. But the L was already out. So here there is no, because this is L times this, okay, and then it's bigger, it's larger than that, okay. Okay, n over L, so which gives n over Tn omega L minus 1. That's it, okay. So we don't need this term anymore. N plus logarithm of Kn divided by n. Okay, so now we want to make n goes to infinity. And actually it turns out that Tn omega divided by n, by just an application of the law of large number, is converging towards a constant which depends on L and delta. Okay? So let's denote by QL delta the probability that sum over I equal 1 to L of omega I smaller than minus delta L. Okay. Okay, QL delta, and then, so I don't do it here because I don't have time, but you can easily show that Tn of omega divided by n divided by L, okay, Tn of omega over n sur L is converging as n goes to infinity towards QL delta divided by 1 plus QL delta, okay? So this you can do without problems. And actually QL delta, let's say that by large deviation inequality, you can prove that 1 over L logarithm of QL delta is converging towards minus sigma of delta, which is the rate function associated with this large deviation principle, okay, and which is actually sigma of delta is the supremum over lambda strictly positive of lambda delta minus logarithm of expectation of exponential lambda, so the cumulant lambda omega 1, okay, and that's it. Okay, so this is the Legendre transform of the cumulant. Yeah. Okay, so this is just an application of the easiest large deviation principle. Okay, so that's what you obtain. Then finally, here, when you let n goes to infinity, you obtain that you let n goes to infinity, and you obtain, so at the beginning, QL delta times L divided by 1. So let's call it Pn. Let's call it PL delta. Okay? Let's call that PL delta. And finally, you get PL delta times PL delta, so then divided by L, okay, as n goes to infinity. This becomes PL delta divided by n times 2 beta L h minus delta, okay, so we'll cancel the L afterwards, plus small o of L, okay, and minus 3/2 of logarithm of n divided by Tn omega L, okay, so which is PL delta minus 1, and minus 1. And of course, log of Kn divided by n goes to 0 as n goes to infinity. Okay. So we are left with this, and this is true for all L and delta. Okay, true for all L and delta. Okay, and here we know that what you get here is J beta of H. Okay, so the free energy is larger than this for all L and delta in 0, 1. So now we want to figure out when, okay, when exactly this is positive. Okay, so we can let L goes to infinity. This remains strictly positive. Okay, and we can let L goes to infinity. So actually we can also divide by L inside. Okay, and you get that. So finally, log of PL delta minus 1 is actually log of, so it's PL delta minus 1, it's 1 plus Q L delta divided by Q L delta minus 1. Okay, and QL delta, actually QL delta behaves like exponential of minus sigma delta L. Okay? And then when you replace it here, you see that you are left at the end with something of order sigma delta times L. Okay? So here, at the end, you are left with 2 beta h minus delta, okay, plus small o of 1, so it's going to disappear when L goes to infinity, and minus 3/2 of sigma delta. Okay? And when this is positive, you know that your free energy is strictly positive. Okay? So we are left with this. So finally, you can claim that J beta H strictly positive when there exists delta in 0, 1 such that this here is positive. 2 beta H minus delta minus 3/2 of sigma delta is strictly positive. Then when you take the supremum of it over delta, okay, you can take here the supremum over delta in 0, 1, okay, and you are left with 2 beta minus 2 beta delta minus 2 beta delta, okay, minus this, and minus, so it was not minus, you had plus, no, minus 2 beta delta plus 2 beta h, okay, and you want this to be strictly positive. There is a sign problem, no? Beta h should be plus. There should be a minus here. Okay, and a plus here. Okay, so I lost it somewhere. Okay, here it was. Here that was this, okay? Minus 2 beta h plus delta. So probably I made a mistake by rewriting it, no? H minus, yeah, it was delta minus h. Okay? That was it. Delta minus h. Okay, and then finally, here you figure out that you have, again, a Legendre transform. So multiply everything by 2 divided by 3, okay, and you're going to get 4/3. Okay, here you get 1, and here you get 4/3. Okay, and this is the Legendre transform of sigma delta, which was already a Legendre transform. And you know that when you take the Legendre transform of the Legendre transform, you are back to the initial function. Okay, so actually this is logarithm of the cumulant exponential 4/3 beta of delta omega 1. 4/3 beta of omega 1. Okay, this was the cumulant minus 4/3 of beta h. Okay, this must be strictly positive. You want it strictly positive, so at the end what you get is h. H smaller than, so 1/4 beta divided by 3 logarithm of, so which gives a log cosh, actually, log cosh, okay, because omega 1 is Bernoulli, okay, so takes value plus and minus 1, and it gives you log cosh of the same quantity, 4 beta divided by 3. And this is the Montus curve that we were looking for. Okay? So at the end, we obtain what we wanted. So this is the lower bound on HC beta. Okay, for the 10 last minutes, Francesco is going to explain you how this can be applied. The same kind of strategy can be applied to obtain some information about the order of the transition.
Okay, I will be necessarily quite quick and sketchy, but the idea which underlies the proof which has been explained by Nicolas is, in a sense, quite easy. So we have our environment, our sequence of MIGA. Okay? Here we have the sequence, and we have divided in stretches of length L. Okay? And we have just identified some stretches which were interesting, and then we have asked, well, let's just consider the trajectories that go here and visit this stretch, etc. So, well, this is an idea that can be pushed further. Namely, one first defines a rule for a stretch to be interesting, good, if you want. And the probability that a stretch is good typically decays exponentially in L. So it's a stretch of length L, okay, with a positive constant C. Now, Nicolas has looked at the case where when you go to a stretch, you just dip into the water and you stay below. But in general, you could, well, consider all the trajectory that do whatever they want in the stretch, but they just start at the beginning at 0. So the second point is to be sure that if you are in a good stretch, then the partition function of the system of length L just in the stretch okay, beta h omega, when the stretch is good, well, this should increase exponentially, like a partition function with some g. So, in a sense, so this is, we have two constants in the game. One which says how a typical stretch is, and one says how do you gain when you are in the stretch. Well then, since we have taken isolated box, how much do you have to wait to find a good stretch? Well, it's geometric random variable with this probability. So roughly the distance between the good stretches is the inverse of the probability, so e to the CL. But then, well, the idea is, in general, if you have such a rule, what can you do on the partition function? Well, let's be very rough. You have the partition function of the system until n, Zn, constrained or free, beta omega, beta h omega. And then you just restrict to the trajectory that do what I've just drawn. So make this, and then this and then this, etc. But since everything is independent, well, very roughly, what you get is the partition function of a system. This is e to the CL, okay? Plus L, but it's the same. I write in this way, constrained, but and I write this way, so a partition function for a restricted system, just this one, and multiplied by itself, how many times? Well, n divided the typical distance, e to the CL. This I'm very, very rough. What Nicolai has been doing is just to show that if you just take everything into account, this is what you get. But then there it's very easy because you estimate from below what is the contribution. Well, you have to make a big jump of size e to the CL, and this, the simple random walk to come back after e to the CL gives you 1 over the distance e to the CL to the 3/2. And then here you are free to do whatever you want for a small stretch of length L. But since the stretch is good, you're sure that you gain e to the LG. So you get e to the LG. And everything at n over e to the CL. But let's just rearrange terms. And then this is just e to the n times e to minus CL times L times G minus 3/2 C. I've just rearranged terms. So when you take 1 over n logarithm, the partition f beta h, which is the limit as n goes to infinity of 1 over n, the logarithm of Zn c, then is greater than or equal to 1 over n log. This is erased, and you get e minus CL times L times G minus 3/2 C. Now, this is nice because, well, you have to take L large because these are asymptotic, but you take L large but finite. So this is really very, very small, but you're just interested in proving that the free energy is positive. So if, well, from this you realize that f beta h is strictly positive if G is greater than 3/2 C. And it's a good exercise just to see that Nicolas' proof is just this, where we know explicit G and C. Now, the point is that you can look this the other way around. If f beta h is equal to 0, then it must be that G is less than 3/2 C. Okay? Well, this in general doesn't tell you a lot, but this is a very clever idea. You add a lower bound on the partition function, but from this you get an upper bound on this quantity G. And this quantity G, as it is defined, it is itself a free energy. So, well, what is the idea now? Is just to put yourself here. So, fix H equal H critical of beta. Okay? And then, what is the rule? Now I take a different rule. A stretch is good instead of asking that it has an atypical mean, I ask a stretch is good if Zn, Zl constraint of beta, h, and omega increases at exponential of L times the free energy of beta, h critical of beta, minus delta, where delta is a positive parameter. What am I doing? I'm asking, take the partition function and ask that omega is such that it increases not like the free energy of its parameter. Here is hc of beta. If here it was hc of beta, this is right. Omega, I mean, by definition, a typical omega will do that. I want an atypical omega, an omega for which this is true. Now, the point is, so in our case, G is this quantity. What is not obvious is to quantify the probability that an omega will do this job. But if you remember the Hamiltonian, which is just I equal 1 to n, omega e plus omega I plus h, and there was a beta and then a delta I. If I want to see a system where h is decreased, it says this is just the same as asking that instead of omega I have omega I minus delta. So if I ask, let's search for a stretch of the environment where the omegas, instead of being omega 1, omega 2, omega L, are translated by a small delta. Now, this you cannot do with discrete variables, because if they are 0, 1, but take Gaussian variables, for instance. If you take Gaussian variables, well, you can ask them, instead of looking like 0 mean, of looking like minus delta mean. And how much does it cost this? This is a large deviation estimate, asking that L variables, L Gaussian variable, instead of having 0 empirical mean, have minus L empirical mean. Well, this will cost you E minus L delta square over 2. So that these good stretches with this G have a probability, which case like this, with C equal delta square over 2. So in this case, this strange general inequality translates into free energy of beta, H critical of beta minus delta less than a constant times delta square. Because C is delta square, constant, and this is worth G. So this is very, very roughly the idea of the smoothing inequality that Giambattista Giacomini and Fabio Toninelli have proven in a very interesting paper. And what does it tell you? It's just that here you have the critical line. Here is just beta. If you put yourself, now, here is the delocalized region where f is 0. Here is the localized, where f is positive. If you put here and you look at the way in which the free energy from positive becomes 0, this shows you that the way at which the case to 0 is always at least quadratic. So the transition is always of second order at least. The interesting fact is that this proof carries out to more general model, like the pinning model discussed yesterday. And for pinning model, when you don't have this order, the transition may be also first order. But this proof shows you that as soon as you add disorder in the system, then the transition is always at least quadratic. And this is why it's called a smooth inequality. So sorry for being slightly over time. And this is